Okay, thank you all for sticking around for a little bit. I want to say hello and welcome to everyone. This is our June Enhance webinar. I'm Amanda Borkowski. I'm the DGN staff lead for our Enhance webinars, and I'm really excited to welcome you here today. Let me turn that off. So today we have a really exciting webinar, and we are going to be joined by Emma and Kelsey, the dynamic dairy duo, to discuss Lost in Translation, communicating agriculture to consumers. I'm really excited for this webinar, and I hope you are too. It is definitely going to be dynamic. And with that, we do encourage you to use the chat feature to ask questions and leave comments. And I think there's even going to be some fun activities during the presentation. So be ready if you can. Of course, if you're driving, we do not want you texting and driving, but if you can, be prepared to use that chat feature. And as always, we do really love to see you during these webinars, and our speakers really appreciate it too. So if you are able, I also welcome you to turn your video on. Our speakers are going to be using a really cool platform for today's webinar. So to make sure that everyone has the best experience, I would recommend that you change your view to speaker mode. So if you're looking at the Zoom program, in the top right, there should be a couple of dots with the word view. Click on that and make sure you hit speaker. You'll know if you're looking at speaker view because I'll be really big right now and everybody else will be smaller. But if you see a couple of different boxes of the same size, you might want to switch it. And then with that, also, if you are not speaking, I would recommend that you please mute yourself and we will go ahead. So before we get going, I'm just going to do a couple of Dairy Girl Network updates. And first of all, I want to encourage you to follow Dairy Girl Network on our social channels. Did you know that we have a Facebook, an Instagram, and a LinkedIn? Each one has unique posts and content. So just make sure you follow all three if you are on all of those platforms. It's a really great place, all of them are, where we share events, we share other dairy women, we share articles, photos, and more. So make sure to go ahead and give us a follow. And while you're on Facebook, I'd also encourage you to check out and join our private Facebook group, Exchange by Dairy Girl Network. This group is a vibrant, organic space to ask questions, to share wins, to connect with others, and to discuss any and everything Dairy Girl. It's filled with farming questions, recipes, job openings, and so much more. If you're not already in this group and you want to join, just search Exchange by Dairy Girl Network on the Facebook search bar, and make sure you answer all three questions when you apply to join, and I'll see you there. And with that, I am really excited to introduce today's speakers. Emma, can you go ahead and give a little wave? Emma Andrew-Swarthout is the Director of Dairy Industry Image of American Dairy Association Northeast. She holds a bachelor's in communication, media, and journalism with a minor in Spanish from SUNY Geneseo. In her work at ADA Northeast, she aids in farmer relations. This includes, but is not limited to, facilitating programs which support farmers and how to connect to consumers online and in person. She is a member of the LEAD Class 18 through Cornell University. Her passion for dairy started while growing up on a farm. She still owns dairy cows that are housed on her home farm, Elvi Farms in Newark, New York. When she is not working on behalf of farmers, she can be found competing for Team Chocolate Milk in full distance Ironman triathlons and half and full marathons. Whew. Her training and racing have allowed her to reach the triathlon community online with the benefits of refueling with chocolate milk. Super cool. And also joining us today is Kelsey O'Shea. Kelsey, can you give a little wave too? Kelsey is an industry relations specialist with ADA Northeast. She holds a bachelor's in animal science with a minor in agribusiness management from Cornell University. In her work at ADA Northeast, she aids in farmer relations. Her area of concentration is on youth educational programs and connecting farmers to students through digital and in-person programs. She completed the dairy executive program through Cornell University, and her passion for dairy came later in life when she traded her swimsuits for muck boots and moved from San Diego, California to Ithaca, New York. She now lives on her spouse's family dairy farm, Mapleview Dairy in Madrid, New York. And when she is not working on behalf of farmers, you might find her also running marathons, riding horses, or taking photos of her friends and family. Her venture into running allowed her to also reach a new community with the benefits of dairy to fuel the body before, during, and after exercise. So with that, remember to use that chat feature to engage in today's webinar, and also feel free to unmute yourself to ask questions if that is the better option for you. And before I hand it off to the gals, I also want to give a special thanks to Zoetis for providing the web hosting and recording of our Enhance webinars. All right, ladies, take it away.
Oh,
Awesome. It's always crazy to hear your bio. Like, I'm like, oh, wow, like, nice.
did I do that? Was that me? Wonderful. Well, we're so excited to have you all here with us today. I'm going to get us started, kick us off. Obviously, you've seen the name of our presentation. You saw a little bit about it, I'm sure, in the advertisements for this. Lost in Translation, Communicating Agriculture to Today's Consumer. So with that, we really recognize that it's tricky, right? All the agricultural communications we're going through, it feels like we get new instructions every day, how to reach consumers, how to do something new, do this, do that. We're going to try and simplify it as much as possible. We want you to feel excited about reaching consumers again, not overwhelmed. That's really the goal for today. So with that, I'm going to give us a quick little introduction before we get started today. Obviously, we have to kind of go over rules of the road. Amanda was so kind to give us some of the basic instructions for today's presentation. We have a few more. I promise it'll only take a minute though. So we're going to back it all the way up to the beginning and tell you welcome aboard. Today, we will be taking a direct trip to understanding how we can better communicate with consumers. We are excited to have you join us today. While boarding, please remember to store all of your preconceived notions in the overhead bin or under the seat in front of you. We are here to assist you. We want you to enjoy our journey today. So feel free to ask us for any help you may need using the chat function or unmuting yourself. As a note, we're going to cover a lot of different topics today that may be new and exciting to you, or maybe unfamiliar and a little unsettling. We want you to come with us, enjoy the journey. So we're going to cover primarily today 3 separate topics. We want you to understand how to tune into your consumers, how to translate shared values, and how to tailor your delivery to make the time that you spend on communications effective and easy. I promise it's going to be quick and you're going to love it. As with any new skill, we may experience some turbulence along the way. Just remain seated and we will assist you. Don't forget that chat box is always open. We ask that you use whatever devices you see fit in order to take notes along our journey today. And honestly, we're just glad that you chose to be here today with us. Thank you for choosing the Dairy Girl Network for your webinar needs. So with that, we're going to jump right in to our map, right? If we're going to take a journey, I think we need a map.
Yeah, everyone, I don't know how many flights y'all have been on, but I've been on some really long flights, and my favorite thing is to watch the progression of the map. I think one of the interesting things when we're talking about consumers is in our minds, we're thinking, hey, this map should simply be point A to point B, right? Consumers need to eat. So technically in our minds, they should just automatically support farmers, support the work we do, because that makes sense, right? We all know that's not the case. Okay, so the map on this journey probably looks a little bit more like this. I don't know if any of you are big road trip fans, right? But like the GPS might say 7 hours, but if you take the scenic route, there might be some stops, you might have to use the restroom, grab a snack. So that's what today's journey is going to be. So we're going to make a couple stops along the way. That first one is tuning into our consumers, as Kelsey mentioned. Then we're going to head on our journey and we're going to translate our shared values. And then our last stop, tailor our delivery before you reach your final destination.
Awesome. So we're going to jump right in to tuning into our consumers. So there's a lot of baggage that goes with figuring out what consumers want, right? We have preconceived notions. They have preconceived notions. We mentioned we'd like you to leave them in the overhead bin or below the seat in front of you. Just go with us here, right? We're going to explore who farmers are and who consumers are first, because we can't do anything unless we understand who these people are. And you'd be surprised how little we know about ourselves as farmers. So we're going to jump right into that first.
Yeah. So my disclaimer with the farmer data, this is all from the USDA survey. So this is based on whether or not you filled it out, right? And I know we're busy people, so I respect that. But the first thing we want to dive in for our demographics, okay? And you can see that about 36% are women and the remaining percentage being men. So not quite 50-50, but a decent amount on either side. So we have that. The next thing is, what are our demographics as far as age? And I don't think this graph is going to come to a surprise of any of us. Our younger generation is a pretty small sliver. That's something we're not surprised. The majority of us being that 35-ish to 65 range, but still a good chunk of our industry being that over 65. So that's who we are as a demographic, which can impact the way we see our consumer, view our consumer based on our life experiences, right? And then lastly, another piece of data I want to look at is, where are we as farmers? Where do we live? What do we do? So looking at this, and the best way we thought to translate it is, how many farmers work maybe off the farm and on the farm, and then on the farm. And as you can see, a lot of farmers do spend a portion of their time off their farm working, as well as on the farm, with some of us only being on the farm. But with that, you can still take into account most of us farm in rural communities, right? So our interaction with landscapes, how we purchase our food, where we're purchasing our food is probably going to look a little bit different than when Kelsey dials into the consumers and where they're getting our food. So these are just the three little pieces of data we want to give you before Kelsey dives into who your consumer is.
Awesome. So when we're looking at understanding who our consumers are, right? We're almost 50-50 men to women. So already big difference between who's in farming and who our consumers are. Now, obviously, I'm assuming most of the people joining us today are women. So, we make up a minority in the farming population, but ultimately we're a very powerful equal voice as far as the consumer population goes, which is really different, right? So that needs to be taken into consideration. Next, when we're looking at age and generations, it looks a little bit like farming, but still different, right? That small red bar is our Gen Zs, right? Our youth, that sort of the thing. We've got our big majority there is actually a really large age range of everybody going on from like mid-20s all the way up to basically 60, 65. And then we've got an elder population that continues to age. Now, these are just important things to consider when we're talking about how do we pick which messages to choose? Who are we going to talk to? Now, of course, that big age range, there's a lot of different priorities mixed in there. However, what I'll come back to later is that smaller red piece of the youth. It's really big for us to capture them now, even though they're not the biggest age demographic we may talk about. Now, where are they? And this is, really looking at how, I know we talked about whether or not farmers are living on the farm. That was what we just shared with you. This is a little different. This is actually looking at the percentage of people who have shopped online for groceries. Now, this may come as a little bit shocking, but basically over 50% of people, consumers, have purchased groceries online and either picked them up or had them delivered. Okay, what does that mean for us? How people are getting their food has changed significantly. Obviously, a global panini kind of helped move some things along as in relation to that, but this is where we live now. This is what it is. So now that we're changing that, where we're not, necessarily meeting people face to face in the grocery store, some of these people never even go in. How are we going to influence the decisions that they're making if we don't have any physical space, shelf space? They never even go into a grocery store. So another thing to think about when we're looking at who all these people are and how we're going to move our approach forward in our next portion of this. So we've tuned into consumers a little bit, the basics. Now we're going to get a little more detailed. We're going to go into some shopping preferences and some other really cool data that's out there. Okay, I mentioned obviously a little bit about the consumer demographics. And I mentioned to you that more than 50% of people are buying their groceries online. Okay. here's the thing. Consumers, our next generation of consumers especially, but even millennials like myself, even some Gen Xers, we live online now. We experience so much online. And here's some really interesting data. It's basically looking at how people make purchases. Okay, so these are the percentage of internet users who use a channel as a primary source of information when researching brands. So this is how people are making purchasing decisions. Okay, so that's kind of what we want to look at.
And I think the crazy thing to point out here, and let me know if my mic sounds a little better now, Amanda, is that shift you see. So if you're looking at the younger generation, social media networks outrank where they're getting their information. Whereas if you head down that demographic pole to some of our older generations, you can see, is that better? I can tiny mic this. You can actually see that they're using search engines. So that's just something to point out. There's a little difference between us.
Yeah, which is a really interesting perspective, right? And as we move forward, how much more purchasing decisions are going to be based on social media? So looking ahead at more information, consumers spending money online. So we're not just talking about research anymore. We're talking about money where your mouth is, okay? Actual purchases. Consumers, obviously 58.4%, as seen here on the slide, have purchased a product or a service online. Then we get a little more specific. 28% are doing groceries online on the regular. So this is actually showcasing a little bit between the ages of 16 to 64. And then we've got some other factors in here: buying from a secondhand store, used an online comparison price service, and then used a buy now, pay later service. Now, the reason that this is kind of interesting to me is that a lot of people are utilizing those services as credit. And some of those include dry goods or food products. Not necessarily a super big impact for us as a fresh food group as far as dairy goes, but something to think about in the future as we move towards more shelf-stable products. So looking ahead, our last one, the power of online consumers and purchasing power. This is where I'm bringing it back to what I was saying earlier about, even though that little red slice demographic is smaller, holy bananas, it's powerful. Okay, Gen Z is almost $1 billion or $100 billion in purchasing power.
Which I think one of the interesting things to know is some of the data we're seeing from social science studies is that Gen Z is also a very fiscally responsible group. So they're not just willy-nilly spending their money, which is very interesting, which means it's going to be very hard for us to tap into them, right? We really are going to have to build trust for them to get those spending dollars coming our way as it pertains to dairy. And I think you can really look at that and say, what have they experienced as a generation that would make them be like that, right? What have they seen their parents go through financially that makes them be a little bit more conservative on where and when they're spending their money?
Another important factor for us to consider is that 2030 is going to actually mark the turning point for the US population, where 50% of all Americans will be millennials, Gen Z, or younger. Okay, so in just 7 short years, millennials and Gen Z, and of course Gen Alpha behind them, are going to make up more than 50% of the population. We will be the ones in charge of the purchasing power. Now, as a reminder too, when we're talking about Gen Z, even though they're a smaller portion, that $100 billion, in compared to the millennials who only have about $65 billion of purchasing power, which is kind of crazy. You got to remember too, and you're probably wondering why is it so big? Okay, in part, and I had never thought of this until we started doing some of this research, Gen Z starts buying really young. With the advent of Alexa, online shopping, Venmo, Gen Z has had access to their own purchasing decisions, independent of parents, much younger than even millennials has. All of a sudden, this really useful generation has a lot of money power earlier. So that's in part why we're seeing more of those dollars come through. And now I'm going to have Emma really test your knowledge here on some of the actual grocery store trivia of looking at who our consumers are. So I'll turn it over to Emma.
All right. And I might have to steal your mic because I think my one's not going through, but Kelsey and I love to tiny mic stuff. So we can just share if we need to. So I want you guys to drop in the chat here. In 1970, how many different items or SKUs do you think folks had to choose from in the grocery store? Right. So like 50 years ago, thoughts, drop it in the chat. Let me see.
Any chats through how thought it was, I think you're good. Your noise canceling is not that big.
Oh, got you.
Flip her back.
All right, there we go. Always like tech on the fly. All right, let's see. What do we got rolling in? Drop it in the
In
chat.
general products? Oh, 500. Okay.
Yeah, just across the grocery store. You walk in, how many items?
Dairy, maybe 100. Okay. Oh, we got 300. Okay. Oh, okay. All right. So lots of good guesses. All right. Are we ready for the first one, Emma?
Yeah. All right, so in 1970, so about 50 years ago, we had 40,000 items when you walk into the grocery store to choose from. And so I think this is something really important to note because I think sometimes we can get really caught up in people not purchasing our product and people not care about our products. Like, what does that data tell us? When in reality, a lot of these things are just the fact that consumers have so many more options as we're about to see. And the other things to note too is when it comes to dairy, I'm going to have you guys guess once I reveal our other number, what our biggest competition is in the store for beverages. It's not what you would think it would be. So let's head to today. How many SKUs do folks think we have to choose from today? Items in the store that you can purchase on any given day, go into your local grocery store.
Drop them in. Make your
Let's
guesses.
see. Perfect. Very good. Oh, wow. I love it.
150. Good guesses. All right. We ready?
All right. Yeah. Some people studied because it's about 300,000. So, I mean, just think about in 50 years, what the consumer product marketplace has done. So now that being said, any guesses on beverage wise, who you think our biggest competition is? What is the biggest beverage industry out there?
You can drop that one in the chat.
And you can drop that in the chat. Got some soda chiming in. Soda, a lot of votes for soda.
Somebody did the homework.
Yeah, there's a Deb has gotten 2 right now. So I think Deb's out there doing the homework. It is bottled water, actually. So bottled water is taking up the most competition in the beverage space for any of us, whether it's dairy, soda, juice, etc. So, these are just some things to keep in mind, because I think for me, I know when I communicate, it puts me in a better headspace of like, people don't not like our product. They just have a lot of options, and that's not bad. But how do I make sure that I am communicating to my best ability that I am the best option for them? So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Kelsey for our next stop in the destination. I think we might still have to share.
We may still have to switch. Okay. We'll give it a switch, guys. So now that we did all of our tuning in, okay, right, folks, we got who we are, what we're doing. What do we do with that? What in the world do I do with all of that data? How do I translate that? What should I be thinking about? What does that actually mean for me in practice? Okay, what we need to do then is translate those to shared values. So now that we know who people are, we can say, okay, I can get a sense of who you are. I can get a sense of what's important to you. And then we need to find common ground and basically move forward from there. Okay, so when we're translating, we're expressing the sense of it, right? And especially we think about it because I know for me, there are times when I really feel like consumers straight up speak a different language, which is part of the whole premise for our presentation. It feels that way. They're on a different planet. We don't lead the same lives. We're talking different languages. How do we find common ground? And that makes it a little bit tricky. Now, farmers and consumers are different, and that is okay. Here's the big thing. We don't want to all be the same. That's all right. We want to accept it. We want to understand where our differences are and how we can leverage them in a powerful way, but also find common ground. So you will have to go to consumers and communicate with them where they are. I know that is not everyone's favorite thing to hear, right? Because in a perfect world for me too, in order to convince consumers that we are doing the right things and responsible things, I would just want to bring them all to the farm and show them. Seeing is believing. Come and see. There's nothing to hide here. Okay, we can't do that. And the reality of the situation is this is not the field of dreams. We can build it and they will not come. Okay, it doesn't work like that. So we got to let that dream go and accept the fact that we need to go to them, wherever that may be, whether that's on a handheld device, whether that's on a computer screen, in a social media app, whatever that looks like, we need to accept the fact that, okay, we got to meet them somewhere in the middle. And I know some people are thinking, man, consumers don't meet me in the middle. well, that may or may not be true depending on the consumer, but we're never even going to be heard unless we go to where they are. And then we got to let them decide for themselves, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it.
So I think one of the cool things too is that consumers are communicating everywhere all the time. And that can seem really overwhelming. The reason I say it's cool is I think about it this way. I started college when Facebook was like really picking up and Instagram had just came to the market. So that tells you when I went to college. Anyway, but one of the beautiful things of that is I now keep in touch with way more friends from college than I ever would otherwise, right? Because like I can't text the 20 friends I had in college every day, but I can see what they're posting. I can be like, that's awesome. Congrats on that. That's so cool. Love that you picked up this new hobby, right? So that's the beauty in this idea of in our new society, we are communicating everywhere all the time because we have these nice little computers right at the tip of our fingers, right? Everything I need is right in this phone. I can go anywhere. I laugh too. The first time I studied abroad, I had to get a burner phone. Now I go abroad and I just call Verizon and say, hey, I'm going to be gone for a month and I want to be able to text my mom, fix my plan, right? And that's great because we're really busy. We're all running businesses. We're working sometimes on the farm and off the farm, as we saw. And you don't need to do anything too much. You don't necessarily need to go anywhere. You can use the device, pick a platform that works for you, as Kelsey pointed out, the different ones we had up there, and share your story, which kind of heads us into our next area. Sharing stories to communicate values is the best way to do it. I mean, who has ever sat through a presentation and remembers certain parts because someone's told a story, right? Like that's going to resonate most with your brain. It's going to help stick in there. And so that's really good for us to do of like, how do I turn calf care on the farm into a story? What does that look like? How do I make that matter to someone so that they're going to remember what happens when a calf is first born and why we separate them from the cow to the calf? Some of those big things. And we actually see this on social media all the time. Everyone's favorite word, influencers, right? And sometimes we get caught up in like, what is an influencer? Who is that? I don't want to be an influencer. Maybe you have a negative impression or a good one. But all an influencer is somebody who has influence over you. And that could be someone you work with professionally for some of us, or someone that we look up to and they can impact what we buy and what we purchase. I think of it this way. I follow a really awesome runner influencer. She's really cool. Love what she does. And she posted a video of this program called Sneaker Impact. And without her doing that, I would have never known about this absolutely free way to recycle all my old running sneakers, who then can get donated to people who need them. So that's a really positive way that I was influenced by someone that I follow to do something meaningful that is impactful to me. It pertains to my life and it made me change my habits. Instead of just throwing my sneakers out, I now donate them so they don't go to waste, right? So as you can see up here, a lot of our younger generations, millennials like myself, or Gen Z and younger, are looking to influencers, and it does impact some of their decision-making and purchaser habits. And I know that sometimes we think of that negatively, but ultimately it can be a really positive thing as well, because we can be those influencers.
Yeah, as a quick add-on for this one, the big thing to note about this though, is you can influence an entire generation to make purchases without $1 billion advertising budget. This is incredible for us financially. It's really important to think about that. 25, 30 years ago, unless you were literally Coke and Pepsi having a war with Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera and had billions of dollars. Yes, I hope you all got the reference. I do. So unless you had that budget, forget it. You were making.
I still kind of want to see that happen though.
Oh, okay. It would be lovely if we could do that another time. But the point is, you don't need $1 billion budget to make real changes on purchaser levels, which is incredible. And honestly, as an industry, I think that's going to be an advantage for us because we have that going forward. And we'll jump into our next slide, which of course, shared values are what builds trust and creates loyal customers. I mean, we've already kind of teed that up here. You got to build the trust. You've got to use that transparency. It's going to create loyal customers overall. And when they feel connected to you, they're much more likely to come back to you and purchase again. And again, that's one of the big things that we have in spades. We only make up 2% of the population, right? Farmers in general. I mean, very few people are actually tied to agriculture. So when a consumer can see you on social media and maybe DM you or, send you a message on Facebook or whatever that looks like, they can't send Coke a message on Facebook and get a meaningful response. So you have this opportunity to make these one-on-one connections. Now, mind you, that one person, it's one person's purchasing habits. Is it going to change the price of milk by $4? Probably not. Right? In a dream world. But ultimately, that one person's going to tell someone else, right? That other person's going to go present to their kids' preschool or talk to their mom's group and say, hey, I switched back to real dairy. Here's why, because there's this farmer and I talked to them. So, you speaking with one person obviously has the ripple effect. It's very important. That's why we really want to focus on this moving forward, translating our shared values to make that connection.
Awesome. I think we're headed into our layover now. Everyone's favorite.
So this is where we're going to need all of you to get active with us. So get ready in the chat here. And we're going to put what we've learned to use as far as translate. It's time to communicate. So here's my little steps. A different item is going to come up on the screen. And you're going to have 1 minute to write one sentence description of the item without using the name in the chat. And the name that we're trying to get you described will be in parentheses up on the screen, so you'll see it. And then once the 1 minute's up, once the 1 minute's up, we're going to have everybody drop their descriptions in. And the whole point of this is the fact that these are everyday items. Like I guarantee, even if you're not using these yourself, they're in your house, you see them regularly. And the whole point of this is even people like us who are probably same mindset, right? Especially when it comes to food and dairy, can describe things very differently. The way we use language to describe things that are happening can look very different person to person, where you live, things like that. Okay. So first item coming up. Here we are. So you have 1 minute to describe to me without using the words reusable water bottle, whatever your reusable water bottle is. All right. So 1 minute. And then once the minute's up, I'm going to have you drop it in the chat. I feel like we should have uploaded music in there.
I think you guys only need 30 seconds. So you guys have 15 more seconds. I mean, come on, who's going to race?
We're not competitive at all.
Okay, folks, 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Drop them in the chat. All right. We're going to just start going through some of these. So we have a convenient tool to remain hydrated while on the move. We have a mobile container to keep water cold. It's a means of bringing hydration along with me on my day. Perfect. Ergonomic hydration vessel. I like that one. I want to start calling my water bottle that. I love it so much. All right. And what do we have? Any others? Does anyone want to drop any more in? Okay. So we're going to go to the next one. We're going to debrief on all these right after. Okay. So next one, this one's, when we do this in person, this is the best one because we have people sit back to back and it's hilarious. So in the chat, describe silverware without using the word silverware. And go. And just a reminder, don't drop it in the chat until the 30 seconds is up. We don't want you to influence anyone else. Three, two, one. All right, drop your answers in the chat.
Ooh.
Eating utensils, utensils for eating food, made of metal, miniature shovel used to eat food. I want that. I'm going to start calling it that. Utensils to eat food. Okay. So on this one, very similar, very similar. I think the funny thing is too, when we do this in person, we have found that nobody calls it silverware really, or it's like a really hard word for people to realize what you're describing. So it's kind of interesting when this one's described as well. All right, we got one more item, and this one's a fun one. I think we're all going to have fun with this. All right, describe chocolate milk without saying chocolate milk. And go. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, drop your answers in the chat. Whoa, everyone really liked the chocolate one. It was just like ding, 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 in the chat. Okay, we have, I love it. High protein brownie to go. That's amazing. Deliciously flavored, refreshing real dairy. What we didn't tell you is we're actually trying to rebrand chocolate milk, and we're going to steal all these. No, I'm just kidding. Nutritional rehydration, basically liquid happiness in a glass. Love it. Yummy, creamy beverage to refuel your body. Best beverage in the world. High protein, low calorie, delicious beverage. Best to enjoy ice cold. Sports shake. Awesome. Okay. I love it. I love it. So now we're going to debrief on this a little bit. Okay. So did everyone recognize the items from the photo? I mean, that's a yes. Thumbs up. You can put a little thumbs up with your video. I'm assuming drop it in the chat, right? Yeah. Now, based on some of the descriptions written, would you have immediately gotten those? So I think like if we were to go back and say the ergonomic vessel to carry hydration, would you have immediately thought reusable water bottle, right? So that, kind of the point of this is we all use words differently, and those words we use can be impacted by our life experience, where we grew up, the area in which we live, where we came from, how old we are. All those things can impact our worldview, and things can get lost in translation, even if we're talking about liquid brownie happiness, aka chocolate milk, right? So in the chat, what kind of surprised you about this activity, other than like these are some pretty phenomenal names that we came up with? Just drop it in the chat or unmute yourself, honestly, if you'd rather just chime in verbally.
This is Becca. I thought it was interesting how silverware, how similar everything we said was. And then chocolate milk, it felt like what we all want it to be, right? It would be interesting to have consumers put in the chat, what is their relationship or what is their, association with chocolate milk? Like silverware has a strong brand.
Yeah. Well, I honestly, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. 100%. Silverware, it's really fun for us to see how all this shakes out. And even in the water bottle, was pretty basic, but probably starting with silverware has no emotional attachment for anybody, right? Yeah. I don't have an emotional memory of silverware that I'm like, oh.
No. Yeah. And you know what? Sorry. Another thing that's interesting. No one was like a sustainable utensil to use food, right? Or like, let's put some emotional description behind this. It's just a fork.
Mm-hmm. Well,
shovel food.
I will give you the people in person struggled with that one because so many people called them cutlery instead. A lot of people from the South hanging out at our last presentation. Really different words for it. So when we put people who are from like the South and the North and them trying to like communicate, hilarious. But anyways, all that to be said, yes, there's much less emotional, and realistically, you should sell that idea to silverware that they should be pinning themselves as sustainable, because I think they'd make more sales. But anyways, yes, emotional things. always too, I guess the big thing is the pivot, right? So I was loving that I was seeing in this, I'm thinking, wow, I now have 7 different ways to describe chocolate milk in case I'm talking to a consumer and they're not feeling it, right? You're reading people, you're like, oh, that didn't hit home with you. Okay, I'm going to try something else. Let's try a different way of thinking about this. Love it. Anything else that you guys noticed about just seeing what other people put? How long or short the descriptions was, anything like that?
Yeah. And especially the fact that we're very much visual learners and doing this virtual. How did you guys feel about having to write this out? Like specifically asking you to drop this in the chat. Did that impact the words you used because it was written versus how you would speak it? Right. So if I'm thinking the way I interact on my Insta stories versus the way I interact on my Instagram comments, so I'd be curious to see or hear. And yet again, unmute yourself.
I would say this is Heidi. It definitely affected me because I'm a speaker more than a writer. So I would have had a lot more to say. It may not have made as much sense because I actually had to think as I typed it. But I think that speaking is so much easier than writing. And for some people, it's the other way. But that's just me personally.
Yeah, I love what Amanda said in the chat. I felt like I had enough time to think about it and adjust it before I sent it. And so I think that gets into our communication styles too. Or am I an internal processor or an external processor? And I'm with you, Heidi. I want to talk through it. It might not make sense at first, but we'll get there. The plane will land, pun intended. But so that's kind of where I'm at. So awesome. So that's just a fun activity we like to do. We also love to do that in person. We have people sit back to back and it's super fun. So with that, we're going to head to our next stop on this journey where we're going to be talking about tailoring your deliveries.
Yes. Okay. So I'm going to jump in on this one and kind of chat about our consumer funnel. Okay. So we've talked about, I want to rehash really quick so we all know where we've been. We talked about tuning into who our consumers are. We've talked about translating, right? How we're going to communicate to them where they are. We got to go to where they are. We recognize that they have a lot of purchasing power and we got to go. So now we want to really fine tune that delivery to make sure that if I'm going to take the time to stop farming, I need to make sure that it's going to be effective. I mean, and that's, I think, too, the feedback I get from a lot of farmers is, I want to get on social media, but it feels like I'm, screaming into the void, right? Or this takes so much time to do. I don't want to waste my time. Respect. Me neither. So in tailoring our delivery, I think we can really help avoid that wasted time feeling. I think we can feel more successful. We can kind of go from there. So looking at our consumer funnel here, so make it a little bigger for you guys. This is like my favorite visual, I think, about this. I want to move consumers through this journey. Okay. I want them to start with just being aware of who the heck we are, right? The bare minimum. I need them to know who we are. And then I want to move them into this consideration phase. They know who we are and they're trying to figure out, is this a person I like? Is this a person I trust? How do we feel about them? Then we get into conversion. And this is that point where they're like, I might have had some preconceived notions before, but I think I feel differently. Or, wow, I really think I trust this person. I really do like this. I'm going to buy this in the store. Then we get into loyalty. And that is where we're talking about people who say, nope, I'm going and I'm getting real dairy every time I hit the grocery store. And then we go all the way down to advocacy. And these are my favorite people. When you get those not so nice folks in your comments and you don't even have to respond, but your tribe is already out there. Your team is out there and they're saying, excuse me, who do you think you're talking to? No, this farm is amazing. Leave them alone. So that's our consumer funnel. We're going to go a little bit more in depth on each of these. Okay. So we're going to start with the awareness and consideration piece. I'll jump in there. Like I said, how do we get customers or consumers into the awareness and consideration phase? Okay. Here's the thing. We got to think about message construction. When we're just trying to get people aware of who the heck we are, we have a very short window. Remember, people, we haven't actually talked about this yet. Consumers and everyone out there, previously our attention span was 7 seconds. In the newest study done, it's only about 3 to 3.5. You have 3.5 seconds to get someone into the awareness of who you are, why your brand's important, why your product's important. That is a disgustingly short amount of time. Okay. So our messages have to be brief. 12 to 15 words, clear language that a 12-year-old would understand. We want to repeat them for memory and retention. You'll notice even in our presentation today, hey, sneaky behind the scenes here, we have 3 really key words that we're using for memory and retention. We want you to tune into consumers. We want you to translate shared values. And ultimately, we want you to tailor your delivery. You'll hear us repeat that, literally using the same technique here, right? We want to do the same thing. In dairy in particular, I really like to think of our messages in this way. This is my favorite simple message construction for dairy. I always throw it out here. I want everyone to use it. This is not like hide away, keep away, none of that. We are not gatekeeping anymore. It is 2023. We are sharing. So message construction simplified. Farmers work every day to be the best stewards of the land, animals, and people that they possibly can. That's it. 12 to 15 words, really short and sweet, communicates exactly what we want to know. It gives us a sense of environmental. It gives us a focus on our animals. It gives us a sense of the people, and it tells us that we want to be the best stewards of them that we possibly can. So this is the basics, right? We're talking awareness. I'm just getting people in the door for awareness and consideration of, do I trust this person? And then Emma's going to jump in and get you into conversion and loyalty.
Awesome. So, this is that phase where we really want people to say, okay, I'm only going to pick real milk because of this experience I had when I was talking to someone, when I was talking to a dairy farmer, and I want to become loyal. And how are we going to get people there? So I think the biggest thing is being timely and relevant as possible. So when you're sharing information and stories from your farm, take them on that journey, make them feel like they are a part and they know what's going on. Like, yeah, I know that they're not planting corn today because Heidi told me she can't plant corn when it rains, right? Like, make them feel like they're a part of this. Or say, oh, it's 3:00. I know that's when Heidi milks the cows on her farm, and I'm going to tune in because her Insta stories are always so fun at that time, right? Just like little things like that to make them feel like they know you, which ties into that authenticity piece. Be your authentic self. And I think, the older we all get, the more we can just be like, yeah, I know I'm not going to be everybody's cup of tea, and I'm okay with that now. And I think that's a beautiful thing to embrace when you're online. Not everybody's going to want to follow you or follow your content, but when you make content that's true to you, it is so much more fun. I joke with Kelsey and my friends all the time. I make my reels for myself because I love editing together my little life experiences and then sharing them with my friends who I know will enjoy them. And that's okay. I don't need to have tens of thousands followers. That's not really what I'm trying to do. I want to make true, authentic content that shares my activities and the things that I enjoy to do. And then also interact with that online audience. Even if it's simple, taking 1 hour every day, double checking your comments, your likes, your shares, and just liking each comment, maybe responding, just little things like that. And then I also think sharing others people's content, right? We all have these online tribes, people we love to follow, share their content to your Insta story. One of the awesome things that I love to do as well is, like, I'm in dairy all day, every day, love to talk about dairy, but like, I am not a pork producer, or I do not run an egg layer house. So there's some people in agriculture that I like to follow to learn about how they produce those things. And I can share those to my farm page so that my followers can also learn about those things as well. And that can help create this community that feels very loyal to you and your brand. And then we head on to advocacy. And this is my favorite because, as Kelsey said, these are the people that will like come to bat for you. They're like, hey, you don't even need to do the work because I'm doing the most. And I have one of these. Her name is actually Karen, which is funny. So y'all know she's amazing though. She shares every single one of my farm posts. She will comment on it. She has the most enthusiasm I've ever seen from a follower. And I love it. That's what I love to see, because I always think of it this way sometimes too. I think it means a lot more when someone who maybe has no associations with agriculture is going to bat for you, right? Because we all know there's the people out there that say, well, of course you're going to say that, Emma, you work for the Milk Association. Or as some people on the interwebs like to call it Big Milk, right? Which Kelsey and I are owning and rebanding. I'm like, yeah, I work for Big Milk because it's awesome. And I love it. But it means so much more when someone says, yeah, I grew up in New York City, but I've been following Emma and her journey, and I feel like dairy milk is the only milk for me. Sometimes having those people in our arena can really help push that needle. So with that, I'll pass off to Kelsey.
Okay, guys, we have another activity coming in tight here. I know we're coming up on our time limit, And we want to save at least the last 5 minutes to give you some questions. So with that, obviously we talked about in tailoring your delivery, I want you to think about that customer or consumer funnel. Before you even start an engagement with someone or start communicating with someone, take that 2 seconds, step back, say, where are they in the funnel? Because here's the thing. I'm a big fan of coming in guns blazing. Okay. I like it. It's my style. Now, if someone doesn't even know who we are, right? They are like awareness of dairy farming and farmers. And I come in hot with, well, did you know that sand bedding increases lying time by 35%? And ultimately that's going to increase rumination time by another 15%, which leads to higher quality milk production per cow and efficiency on the back end of feed. So that way, ultimately there's less emissions. They're gone. They left, right? So done. And mind you, all of those facts are fabulous. Mind you, none of them are like super specifically accurate. So don't reuse any of those, but you get the idea. Okay. If this person is in awareness and I come in so hot, they're done. Forget it. So take that 2 seconds. And mind you, this is hard for me. I need to check myself regularly when I'm talking to people who don't know a lot about dairy and say, okay, where are you? So we're going to do a little practice. So get the typing fingers ready. Okay. I'm going to give you a scenario here. You guys are going to guess where they are in the customer funnel. We're going to work through maybe what some key messages we would share for them. And I know that, Deb in particular, she's been really hitting in the comments, guys. So everyone else is competing with Deb, basically. Okay. Test flight. We've got millennial mom, Michelle. Okay. So here's the scenario. You're grabbing your milk from the cooler and you notice Michelle is behind you. So you hold the door open, you're being polite. She then says, oh, no, thank you. I don't drink milk anymore. It's really not safe. Okay. This could happen very realistically. Okay. So the first thing we want to do when we think about millennial mom, Michelle, is where do I think she is in the funnel? Okay. So you guys can type it in. Now, remember, we've got awareness, consideration, we've got conversion, we've got loyalty all the way down there. And then we've got advocacy. Okay, we got some awareness coming in. Oh,
awareness for dairy milk, advocate for non-dairy alternatives, awareness. Okay.
Yes. Okay. Totally see the justification for all of those, especially Becca coming in hot with the awareness for dairy milk and the advocating for non-dairy alternatives. I would actually almost put Michelle in the category of consideration. Michelle thinks she knows some things. She's aware of who we are and what we're doing, right? And has a preconceived notion and thinks she's made a purchasing decision. Is it the right purchasing decision? No. But we're going to go ahead and work with that, right? So if we figure, let's say she's somewhere maybe between awareness and consideration. She's got some preconceived notions. We need to kind of rethink this. So how can we determine what key messages, now that we know where she is? And I would be thinking in my brain, okay, this is someone who's only heard a few things about us, maybe hasn't gotten a ton of correct information. What do we think would be a good key message to hit home with millennial mom, Michelle? I mean, her name gives away a little bit of her priorities. So hit me, we talked about some key messages. We talked about caring for the land, caring for our animals, caring for people, obviously the nutrient goodness of dairy. What do we think we want to tell Michelle first off? Since we're having this interaction, we're live, we're like, you know what, I'm here, I might as well do the dang thing. Give me like a few words in the chat. What do we want to start with Michelle in this interaction? Oh, look at you guys coming in hot. We like it. All right.
Yeah. Deb said, did you know the dairy industry is most regulated segment of food industry? Beck said, I'd ask her why she thinks that and why she made the decision. And I want to make a grounded assessment of her. And then Jennifer, why do you think it's unsafe? I love that people chimed in answering with a question because we don't know what she thinks about it is unsafe.
Absolutely. And especially if we're thinking of people being in that awareness or consideration phase, we've got more exploration to do. This was hands down the absolute way. I love it. Now, totally appreciate Deb coming in hot with the facts. That's me coming in hot all the time. And on occasion, we do need to step back though and say, okay, wait a minute. Where did you hear that? Oh, that's interesting. Did you make that decision recently? Was there something you read or saw? What do you think is unsafe about it? And then based on this, so what key messages would we share to kind of combat that? Which honestly, that's Deb got the next step. You skipped ahead again, Deb.
And
It's
so
okay.
we'll give you an answer. So Michelle comes back to Becca and she says, I've decided not to drink cow's milk because I heard it's full of antibiotics. That's why she thinks it's not safe. So what would your key message be to that?
Yeah, which honestly, that's a great one then for what Deb said. It's the most regulated food segment in the industry. If we did come back, or if she did come back, obviously with like, oh, I think it's filled with antibiotics, you can immediately share just the facts. Oh, actually, did you know, any cow that's treated with antibiotics, their milk does actually not go to market. None of it's in there and all of it's highly regulated and tested, right? So you guys definitely got that piece of it. The important thing is, again, our inclination to protect and feel that little bit of a sting, right? I mean, it stings. It's not comfortable when people accidentally say something that they don't realize, right, that you're a dairy farmer. They just think that you're another person. They don't realize that that's your entire livelihood. That's something you love and care about. So that's kind of the reason we want to check ourselves. We want to say, okay, where is this person? How can I meet them where they're at? They don't know where I'm at either, but I need to do the hard work. And that's tough to own. We want you to own it though. And in order to preserve time for questions, we're going to skip over our next test flight.
It was Gen Z, Jerry. We do love him, but we're going to have to pass on that.
Yeah.
All right. So we have reached our destination. We have tuned into consumers. We have translated our shared values and we've learned how to tailor our delivery. You came with baggage and I hope you're leaving with luggage because we feel really equipped and we got some awesome souvenirs from this journey that we're going to use to tell our stories a little bit better to those around us. So with that, we're going to open it up to questions for Kelsey and I. We'll share a little tiny mic. Feel free to unmute yourself, ask questions.
Ooh, perfect.
This isn't a question. This is a thank you and a heads up that I'm borrowing that practice.
Oh, love it.
That you did, because I think it's a really strong way of showing, just branding and recognition and awareness of product in a market. Genius.
Oh, I mean, thank you. Honestly, again, this is 2023. We are not gatekeeping. You steal, my dear, call it your own, do the thing. And that's the big thing, right? We love doing this stuff. None of it is earth shattering by any stretch of the imagination, right? It's wonderful to hear it condensed in a way, and we hope it makes it feel less overwhelming. That was the whole goal of us doing this, was to make it feel less overwhelming for our farmers. So you guys are like, okay, this is simpler. It's not as scary or as daunting as I had thought it was.
Yeah. And I think we styled this training. So really this information you learned can be used on social or it can be used in person, right? Things change a little bit, whether you're writing something in the comments, right? Or verbally expressing it, but it just teaches the same tools and they go both ways.
It's been really fun to have you guys sharing in the comments as well. And the last thing I'll kind of share is your fun Gen Z piece is for those of us who are millennials and who have been consuming social media content from the very beginning, we've always looked at the face value of the content, right? We're looking at the face, what's out there, what's the photo, what's the video. And for a long time, we focused on really produced videos. Okay, Gen Z is totally feral and wants everything live. They are the wild ones and they live in the comments section, which again is very counterintuitive because we almost think of Gen Z as like holistically video content, whatever. I have talked to more Gen Zs probably than I ever thought I would, given that I don't have children. And the first thing they say to me when we talk about a piece of content is, well, did you read the comments though? And I'm thinking to myself, I was watching the video. No, I was not reading the comments.
Yeah, our generation was told to avoid the comments at all section or at all costs. It gets ugly down there.
Yeah.
Like, you don't go there. Like that's the Badlands, Simba.
So with that being said, yes, they do embrace the unprofessional, unpolished video just fine, and they're completely fine with it. So that's kind of what we want to encourage for all of you is you can make it more raw than you think you can. You can really put yourself out there, beta test some stuff. That's the joy of having such easy ways to create content. You can make a lot of it an experiment. And as far as the rest of it goes, you know, as the one-on-one interactions go, those are the ones we want you to think more thoughtfully about. We want you to really take that time, assess people for where they're at, and not waste your time because you're busy people. Oh, awesome. Thank you guys so much for
Yeah.
all of your attention and love it. Oh, Reddit on dairy promotions. Oh, my Lanta, you're gonna give me palpitations someday. But we really appreciate it. Side note to all of you, I know Amanda pushed this out at the beginning, obviously to connect via Facebook group on for Dairy Girl Network. A big fan of Facebook groups. We happen to have a Facebook group called American Dairy Engaged. We encourage all dairy farmers to join it. Obviously, it does specifically serve our 6-state region. However, we don't turn anybody away. We're always posting almost daily content of great stories to share, different recipes that include a minimum percentage of dairy, as well as any news or updates, and then as well as actual social media trainings and content from other social media professionals. So we are American Dairy Engaged. You can search us out there. And if you need anything from us as far as our professional checkoff lives, we're at americandairy.com.
Awesome. No, that's everything. Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Yeah, that was super wonderful. Thank you, Emma and Kelsey. I feel like I'm leaving this webinar like really happy and refreshed, honestly. So I hope everybody else is too. That was very engaging, and I definitely feel like I am walking away with some additional tools in my toolbox. So thank you so much for that. Thank you all for joining us today. And again, thank you to Zoetis for being our webinar host. And then I hope you all have a fabulous weekend, and thank you for joining. You'll get this recording next week.